Hi everyone, I am Jeff Lawton. I'm going to look at a game from today's Magnus Carlsen Invitational Tournament. It's round 6 and it's the Armageddon game in the match between Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, and Ian Nepomniachtchi. And it was really a really weird match, to be honest. The players were just playing really quickly, playing these really strange openings, just totally non-book stuff. And it was absolutely fascinating to watch. And this is the Armageddon game because the score was 2 points all. Carlsen lost as white, and he in the first game he won as white in the third, and drew both his games with black. And in the Armageddon, of course, white has 5 minutes against 4. White needs to win to get the 2 points, and black needs to draw to get the 2 points. But the standings before the round began, Magnus is sort of almost guaranteed to qualify in the top 4, whereas Jan needs to gain, he needs really to have scored 2 3-point wins, so it's looking difficult, unless he can beat Fabi on tie break, but then he needs Fabi to lose twice as well. So we had d4 from Magnus Carlsen, knight f6 from Jan, and knight f3, g6, bishop f4, sort of London's system against the King's Indian. We had knight b to d2, castles, c3, d6, h3, giving the bishop a square, c5, captures on c5, d takes c5, e4, knight to c6, and bishop e2. So it's the main line of this variation. b6, castles for white, bishop to b7, and rook e1, so ready to protect the e-pawn, give it more support. Queen to d7, queen c2, and rook a to d8, rook a to d1, and queen c8. So Magnus, even though he needs to win the game, he's just playing very solidly, hoping with his e-pawn, which can advance later, that is, he can play with the slight space advantage, but he's playing for sort of slowly increasing the pressure rather than going all out for a win, with like some sort of sacrificing, So we had e5, grabbing the space, knight d5, bishop to g3, and knight to c7. We had queen a4, knight to e6, and the queen swung over to the king's side. We had bishop to a6, bishop takes a6, queen takes a6, and now queen e4, hitting the loose knight. Queen to b7, protecting it, knight c4, one pair of rooks came off, and rook d8, another pair of rooks came off, rook d8, knight c d8, and now the queens came off the board. Queen b7, knight b7, and a4. So we now reach an interesting minor piece endgame where the pawn on e5 gives white a bit of space, and it's hard for black to try and sort of say, all right, I'll play f5 and not worry about that, because after takes, ef6, gf6, bishop b8 would pick off the a pawn. Of course, if you advance that, then the b6 pawn falls to the knight. So instead we had king f8, king f1, and the kings both walk towards the center of the board. King e8, king e2, king d7, king d3, knight b to d8, and now knight to g1, making way for the f pawn. Knight to c6, king to e4. So it's a beautiful square for the king, centralized on e4. We had h5, f4, sort of perhaps in the future hoping for the f5 break, and then black starts to get short of space on the king's side. We had f5 check, e takes f6, e takes f6. So now if black's allowed to play f5, then he's doing absolutely fine. So Magnus sacrificed a pawn with f5, knight to g5 check, and now king to d3. And we had g takes f5, now knight e3, knight to e7, protecting the f5 pawn, and now knight to e2, knight to e6, and now king c4. So white's hoping either to play the knight into d5 and get the king to d5, or perhaps walk in this way and then play the a5 break. So we had king to c6, and now b4. C takes b4, c takes b4. So white has to do this really, because otherwise black himself is going to play a6 and then b5, and then white's got no entry squares, and this would be fixed as a weakness. But white's able to do that. Bishop h6, a good move, activating the bishop. b5 check, king to d7, and now knight d5. So white's got something out of this. These pawns are on black squares, which become a target for the dark squared bishop here. So we had knight takes d5, king takes d5, f4, bishop f2, and I should add here that we're on move 42 and both players were down to about 60 seconds now, so it becomes very much bullet territory. And if you've watched any of the games between the recent match, the 194 game marathon between Alireza Firouzja and Magnus, quite a considerable number of these games come down to speed with the mouse and not making mouse slips, and also just, well, flagging the opponent really. It's all part of bullet chess. So we had bishop f8, knight to d4, knight to c5, and now knight c6. So the a pawns get exchanged. Knight a4, knight 8 takes a7, knight to c3 with check, king to c4, knight to d1, allowing bishop takes b6, but now knight e3. Black's going to take on g2 if white allows. But we had bishop takes e3, f takes e3, and king to d3, stopping the pawn. Bishop to c5, protecting the pawn and also hitting the knight. Knight to c6, and now king to d6. We have knight a5, king to e5, starting a very strong king march. You might think black would stay passive, but it wouldn't be the way to play really, and Jan has got an active plan in mind targeting these two pawns. We had king e2, king f4, knight to c4, king g3. Otherwise, white would start to try and push the pawns here. The pawn rather. Knight takes e3, and now the strong move h4. Sort of waiting for white to do something, because white has to move his king. Otherwise the g pawn will fall. King d3, bishop to a7, king to e4, f5 check, which turns out to give white what he's been looking for. After king f2 instead, then after say knight f5, white needs to come and take the h pawn. King takes, knight takes, king takes, then after knight f5, king g4, black's managed to keep his pawn, and it's just a stone cold draw then. Because after f5 check, because all this is, like I said, it's in bullet time rate, so both players are down to seconds by now. It's no increment, by the way. Knight f5 check, king takes g2, knight takes h4, check, king takes h3, and knight f5. So now we get this knight and pawn versus bishop. And this is difficult to defend in bullet chess, and a knight is notoriously difficult to defend against when you don't have a lot of time to figure out all the various knight forks happening. So we had king g4, knight to e7, king g5, and king e5, which is a nice move because it at the same time as sort of heading towards the king's side, the queen's side, towards the pawn. It's shouldering the black king away as well. It keeps the black king from moving nearer to the queen's side, and also the knight covers the g6 square. So these four squares are covered. The black king is sort of in a box over there and unable at the moment to move where it wants to move to. So we had king h6, king to e6, king to g7, knight to c8, bishop to f2. We had knight to d6 and king f8, king d7. So again, we're now sort of creating another sort of a box a little bit at the moment. So at the same time as working the king's way across to the queen's side. The king is being boxed out of it over there, the black king. So we had bishop to g1, knight to e4, king f7, and now king c6. White has to let the king out in order to have some chance of b6, sorry, king e7. So I guess maybe bishop here was a possibility. I haven't checked that actually, but that way you keep the black bishop stopping the pawn. But maybe there's some way there of chasing the bishop off. I'm not sure exactly how. So instead we had king e7, but after knight c5, Magnus achieves his first aim, which is to shelter the pawn from the bishop's glare on b6, and it can now advance. So we had king d8, we had b6, bishop to h2, and now b7, and now bishop to b8. So as long as black keeps his king here, white's unable to maneuver the knight to c7 because it simply can be captured, and that's the only square where you're really going to make any headway. The other possibility is to try and get the knight to here in order to drive the bishop away. But even then, how do you then stop the bishop from covering that diagonal? You can't really do it. Even so, it's interesting to see what happens. We had knight a6, bishop to f4, knight c5, and bishop to b8. Now, for all the things I've said up to now about this, should be an easy draw, it turns out it's anything but an easy draw when you check it on the engine. And this particular position, if it's white to play, then it doesn't seem to be able to make any headway. But if black was to move in this position, then he has to give ground. And I'll explain that a bit further on, because I suspect that Magnus and probably Jan both know that, but with it being so short of time, both players, you can't necessarily stop this happening. So we had knight to e6 check, king e7, knight c7, king to d8, knight to d5, bishop to g3. I'm just manoeuvring around, trying to get the position they both want. Knight to f6, bishop to h2, knight back to e4, and now bishop to b8. It turns out perhaps should play king to e7 first. I think that might hold. But in the game we had, after knight e4, we had bishop to b8 and now knight to c5. So we now get back to the position we had about 5 moves ago, but this time black has to move. And this makes a huge difference. For example, if you play bishop a7, well, if you play bishop a7, then we can play knight to a6, and after king e7, white can advance the king forwards. For example, if king to e6, then we can play knight b4, and now on the next move we're going to play knight to c6, and the bishop has to give way. And for example, that was the move in the game. After bishop a7, knight a6, king to e7, king c7. If instead black plays bishop f2, then we can play king c8, and now the bishop has to move. Either it plays to here to stop the pawn, or here to stop the pawn. If you play bishop here to do that, then knight c7 wins straight away, followed by queening. Whereas if you play bishop to here, the bishop's now on a very short diagonal, which is, known not to be. It's not long enough for the bishop to stay there. So white can play knight c7 here, and after any king move, then knight b5 finally chases the bishop away, and we get a queen. So white would win. And if instead after knight here, knight a6, king e7, and then king to c7. If instead you play king e6, then we can play knight b4 this time. And now the knight's going to c6 to stop that. So you would have to try something like bishop to c5, and then king c8, bishop d6, and again now knight a6 very neatly the knight comes back to c7. Well, I think I've understood that just about. I must admit I'm finding it confusing, but the lines do seem to indicate that white would win. So in the game, Jan played bishop h2, but now Magnus played knight e6 check. And in this position, I think this was the position according to the PGN. Jan ran out of time because if king here, white can play knight c7, and then the queen is happening next move, e8 queen. So a really typical end to a bullet game, and Magnus, so he won the match. So he scored 2 points, and the standings after the round, Carlsen is now in the lead, and his opponent, Ian Nepomniachtchi, is out of the running now because he can only reach 9 points. He can't get into the top 4. And tomorrow we've got, I think it's Ding plays Nakamura tomorrow, and Caruana's playing MVL. So the top 4 look locked in almost, except that MVL, if he wins both his matches, he'd get to 11 points, and if Caruana lost both of his, then well, obviously it's a bit of a long shot, but it could happen. Stranger things have happened. But the key one is tomorrow. MVL plays Caruana, and Maximi needs to beat Fabi in that game in order to keep his chances alive. So thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. It was an interesting Armageddon game with an interesting end to the game, which I hope I analysed properly at the end there. I think I did. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please thumbs up or subscribe. That would be brilliant. Thanks again for watching. Bye now.